66 The World Seen by God 1. Chapter 66. The World Seen by God 1. The Dwarves, Nation, the Dwarven Kingdom. Yet the title of kingdom is only in name, for the last king to exist here lived over 200 years ago. More than 2 centuries past, the final monarch, King Rune the Public, left his country behind in pursuit of becoming a hero, taking up his arms and setting out. With his departure, no royal bloodline remained. Since then, with no heirs to carry on the line, the kingdom has been ruled by the Regency Council, 8 chiefs presiding over each division of governance. They take turns serving as chairman, and whenever an important matter arises, decisions are reached through majority vote. Even so, the atmosphere is not all rigid and severe. The dwarves are not numerous, and with their characteristically hearty temperament and love of drink, they treat one another as brothers and comrades. When the day's work is done, they gather in taverns to drink and share stories. Arguments and brawls sometimes break out, but such things are merely expressions of camaraderie, not true hostility. Indeed, it is not unusual for a meeting of the Regency Council, formal and serious while in session, to end with the chamber turning into an impromptu drinking party. Though their numbers are few, these open and convivial dwarves have long welcomed outsiders, never shunning guests regardless of whether they were human or of another race. Thus they have lived for ages within the mountains. But in recent years, the Dwarven Kingdom has faced a grave crisis of survival. The threat came from a demihuman race called the Quaggoa. At first glance, they resemble oversized moles that burrow through the earth, but it would be dangerous to dismiss them as mere moles. These demihumans walk upright, standing at about 140 centimeters with an average weight approaching 70 kilograms. Despite their small frames, their remarkable mass comes from their unique racial trait. Like other demihumans, they possess both agility and physical resilience, but what sets them apart is their peculiar practice during childhood. They consume ore. The minerals they ingest in youth determine the durability of their fur as they mature. Even ordinary iron ore can give them fur and claws as tough and sharp as steel. If they consume rarer metals such as mithril, orichalcum, or adamantite, they grow into adults with even greater toughness, strength, and physical durability. But there is a trade-off: their steel-like pelts leave them extremely vulnerable to cold. Though their bodies are covered in thick fur, they dwell underground and seldom emerge to the surface for this very reason. They possess no magical power, wield no crafted weapons, relying solely on their claws. Their intellect is shallow and their civilization primitive, and so they rarely venture outside, instead forming tribal societies in caves and tunnels. At one point, the dwarves attempted to exploit this racial trait, raising quaggoa from youth and feeding them ores, hoping to harvest fur with the strength of rare metals yet the flexibility and lightness of hide. Such material would have been invaluable. Yet the attempt failed. However clever the dwarves, raising a demihuman race of such power was beyond them. Most captured quaggoa perished under the conditions of captivity. But some survived, and those survivors grew even stronger and more cunning. Perhaps because of the varied ores they were fed, these individuals developed greater intellect and toughness than ordinary quaggoa. Hiding their abilities, they waited until the dwarves turned their attention elsewhere, then broke free of their cages and escaped. In time, those escapees formed tribes of their own, gathering followers and waging war on the dwarves. Though the dwarves eventually hunted them down, the cost was great, and the losses severe. Since then, their policy toward the quaggoa has been uncompromising. They regarded them as troublesome beasts, vermin that devoured ores. If hunted, their metal-infused pelts could be used for armor, but otherwise dwarves avoided unnecessary entanglement. Yet in recent years, the situation changed. The scattered quaggoa tribes of the Azerlija Mountains began to unite, and launched an invasion against the dwarves. The exact cause remains unclear. Some elder dwarves cautiously speculate that a mutant leader may have arisen. Just as those once captive quaggoa grew stronger from feeding on rare ores, a new specimen might have appeared, one with intelligence and power far beyond the rest. Under such leadership, this sudden unification and aggression would not be impossible. The dwarves were driven back helplessly by the sudden onslaught. Before they knew it, they had lost the capital and been pushed into scattered stronghold cities, fleeing for their lives. What happened to the groups that retreated elsewhere was unknown. Contact had been lost. But the fortress, to which most of the main force had withdrawn, was their last bastion. In that situation the dwarves resorted to a last measure. We can't hold out any longer. Send for outside help. But to whom? There's no nation that can spare an army for this place. Even if they did, a human army in those dark caverns would simply be slaughtered. And if it's a nation, what price would they demand? Call the adventurers. The adventurers. You mean them? Yes. Ordinary adventurers are unreliable, but there is one group we can trust. Ordinary adventurers are hard to rely on. But there was one band the dwarves could place faith in. A great family with a century and a half of history, the group that had once forged ties with the dwarves through some event, those were the ones to trust. So the dwarves issued an emergency request, no, a special commission, to them, Dragon's Dream. They even hired two Adamantidorank members of the party. Given the special terrain of caverns under the mountains, the dwarves reasoned, a small number of powerful elites would be better than a large group of ordinary adventurers. The fewer the better, they thought, but they certainly hadn't expected only two to show up. The merchant prince who paid the fee wore a dour face at the cost, but the two repaid every coin. Shall we have some fun, then? Take it easy. Don't get careless and end up getting badly hurt. Ah, General, please send the payment this way. All right, all right. Take care. But two of you will be enough. If you like, we can send support. That's unnecessary. Just provide proper food and lodging. It was a tough journey to get here. If we're doing this, let's make it a pleasant hunt. They looked, at most, barely 30, and nothing but overflowing confidence. Hunt. Hunt. The dwarves had hunted small bands of quagga before, but the raiding quagga came in the hundreds. Calling that a hunt seemed absurd. How much help could just two adventurers be? The dwarves doubted, but starting the next day, the work they did exceeded imagination. What day is it today? I haven't used it since 200, but, just handle the cleanup for me. It wasn't a purge. It was a hunt, just as they had said. The two, already into the realm of heroes, cut through the quagga like butchers through livestock. A simple frontline fighter and a rearline mage, the most basic vanguard and support pairing. In front of them no quagga stood its ground. While they were blocking tunnels and slaughtering swarms of quagga that threw themselves against them, a leader-type charged. The warrior, less than nolly greater than, faced it alone without even the mage's full support. After a fierce struggle the presumed leader slashed and bled, then fled. Remarkably, it fled while shouting in the defeat of the vanquished, "We'll see about this." Thus the raids that had tormented the dwarves for years finally came to an end. What thousands of dwarves could not handle was done by two adventurers. That, in itself, proved why the great family was great. They had the skill to match their name. That should be worth the fee. We killed a few thousand of them and even drove a blade into what looked like the leader, should be quiet for a while. There may be residual groups, but they'll be quiet for now. If they strike again, call us, if we're free we'll come. As for byproducts, it's too much to haul away, so dispose of them as you please. We won't claim any rights. The dwarves' despair at fortress reached its peak. Despite slaying thousands of quagga and even injuring their leader just days ago, the enemy returned in greater numbers, tens of thousands, perhaps. The commander gripped his beard until it threatened to tear free, staring out beyond the walls where countless red eyes glimmered in the darkness of the tunnels. The dread was overwhelming. Had there always been this many of them in the mountains? If so, the dwarves had been blind to their fate for years. The fortress's natural defenses were their only saving grace, narrow tunnels that prevented all the beasts from attacking at once. But even so, dwarves were only flesh and blood. Endless waves would eventually break them. The commander knew that, even if today's assault was repelled by some miracle, tomorrow or the next day would bring ruin. Yet just as he prepared to rally his weary soldiers with a speech of defiance, determined to fight to the death rather than surrender, news came rushing from the outer gate. Panting soldiers shouted, barely able to speak. They've returned. At first, the commander snapped at the interruption, but realization struck. They could only mean one group. Not the empire, not the kingdom, not some faceless aide. No, it could only mean the legendary family of adventurers who had already proven themselves against the quagga. In an instant, his stern face broke into something close to relief. Bring them here, no, escort them with all honor. Quickly, don't waste a moment. Whatever gods the dwarves prayed to, it seemed their blessings had not abandoned them yet. The fate of the fortress, and perhaps the survival of the dwarves as a whole, would once more rest in the hands of Dragon's Dream. 67. The World Seen by God 2. Chapter 67. The World Seen by God 2. The party of four, now joined by Tiamat, moved swiftly along the ridges of the Azerlija Mountains. Ordinarily, they would have had to take the longer, winding paths, but with Tiamat's blessings upon them, even the most treacherous terrain posed no obstacle. Was this trail always this easy to walk? Are your eyes just for decoration? This isn't a trail, it's a cliff. Well, yes, but still. The slope was nearly 70 degrees, yet they climbed it as though strolling through a meadow. Their feet pressed firmly against jutting rocks, hands grasped ledges with tireless strength, and they ascended with ease. It didn't stop there. A single leap sent them soaring several meters upward. Confidence welled up inside them, an almost reckless certainty that they could run for hours without tiring, and their newfound power answered that belief. It would be wasteful not to use it. With each step they grew bolder, until simply walking no longer satisfied them. They broke into a sprint, the landscape blurring past as Colton took the lead, Rohaim close behind, followed by Dean and Tiamat. Hey, don't you think you're going too fast? It's fine. I feel like I could keep running for hours. You feel it too, don't you? I'm a magic caster, you fool. But, you're not wrong. Even Rohaim, who was by nature not built for endurance, found himself sprinting alongside Colton without fatigue. He marveled, since when did I have stamina like this? Normally, magic casters lag behind warriors in strength and endurance. Yet here he was, running freely, breathing easily, even grinning. There was no strain, only exhilaration. The sensation of relying on nothing but his own legs, rather than spells to fly, filled him with pure joy. If I can run, then I'll run faster. Rohaim pushed harder, his strides lengthening. Dean and Tiamat followed close behind. Is this pace all right? I worry we may be overdoing it. It's fine. This feels refreshing. Tiamat's smile banished Dean's concern. The scenery, beautiful as it was, had already lost some of its novelty. But this was intoxicating. The rush of air against his skin, the solid impact of the earth beneath his feet, the crisp scent of grass and soil, it was a feast for the senses he had never known in Yggdrasil. This is fun. Joy. Exhilaration. Wonder. Happiness. Every emotion surging within him was bright and positive. In Yggdrasil, full-dive sensory law restricted nearly everything beyond sight and sound. No matter how fast you ran or where you went, what you felt were only system messages, damage counters, status effects, not the raw, vivid thrill of the real. But this world was different. I need to apologize to myself for doubting. This world is the greatest. The smell of wet grass, the sharp tang of herbs, the rich musk of trees, the occasional sweetness of blossoms, even the raw scent of earth and stone, all of it was intoxicating. Tiamat reveled in every breath. Ah, how wonderful. This world is the greatest. Tiamat longed to see more, to feel more, to savor every fragment of this new reality. It was nothing like the stale scent of dust that clung to his old room, the musty reek of an aging cooler, the artificial tang of air fresheners, or the sickly sweet aftertaste of the gel-type energy packs he once fed through a weakened digestive system. When he first opened his eyes here, he had assumed it was merely an extension of Yggdrasil. After all, he had fallen asleep in that world, and upon waking, the first thing he saw was an NPC's death warning panel. Of course he believed it was still the game. He was still in the guild's grandest chamber, the throne hall of the temple, his gear and items untouched, all their powers intact. The fact that NPCs seemed to have developed souls had startled him, but beyond that, what did it matter? They were NPCs. They could die, respawn, and return so long as gold was paid. That was all. It was this assumption that made leaving so easy. What harm could it do to step outside for a while? Surely things would be fine without him. Surely. But now he knew. This was not Yggdrasil. This was something far greater. This world was richer, brighter, sharper than anything before. Even the simple act of eating from a convenience store had hinted at it. This world was real. Compared to Yggdrasil, compared even to the polluted, decaying earth he had left behind, this new world was incomparably better. 1,000 times better than the suffocating four walls of his room. Before he realized it, their path had led into high mountain country. The air thinned, their steps crossed snow-swept ridges and jagged rocks. Beasts sometimes peeked from the shadows, only to flee at once, scattering far from the party's path. The cold air stung his lungs, the green slopes gave way to barren cliffs and white drifts of snow. Yet all of it thrilled him. Beautiful. Truly beautiful. This world was the best. And yet, it wasn't enough. He wanted to taste more. To live it, breathe it, consume it. Watching him, Dean could not help but smile faintly. So the young master is pleased. If the god was content, then there was nothing better. If this god were to grow wrathful, the consequences would never end with a single mortal. For everyone's sake, it was good that he was smiling. But behind Dean's reverence was fear. His power is absurd. Colton and Rohaim dismissed the boy as some legendary prodigy, or a hero beyond heroes. But Dean, with his years of hard-won experience, knew better. He had seen God's touch before, and this was no mere mortal strength. The youth had invoked a long-forgotten 5th-tier divine spell, one so ancient it was thought extinct. Other incantations, too, bore the weight of impossibly high tiers. He cast them in succession, each with the ease of breathing, never faltering. Any other priest, even one who had entered the realm of heroes, would have collapsed after a few repetitions. Yet this boy's mana seemed endless, a sea without shore. And as long as he walked with them, their own stamina, too, became limitless. In the thin, biting air of the mountains, they did not tire. In fact, they felt stronger than on flat ground. Hours passed without a single pause for rest, yet not one of them gasped for breath. It was impossible. It was divine. We must never oppose him. Dean had no genius, no power to rival gods. His life had been forged through effort, training, experience, but that was all. Yet he had enough wisdom to know, one does not make an enemy of the divine. If he could remain near this God, if he could serve him faithfully, then one day blessings without measure might fall upon him. And so they ran. Hours melted away. Before long, the jagged ridge gave way to a strange rift between the peaks, a shadowed cleft where no sunlight reached. Dean raised a hand, pointing forward. There, through the gloom, they glimpsed the unmistakable hand of civilization. The sheer face of a cliff disguised as stone, yet hiding walls, battlements, slits for crossbows, and narrow murder holes. The fortress of the dwarves. The dwarves' last bastion rose before them, a natural fortress carved into the sheer cliffs of the Azerlija Mountains. Built as though leaning on the mountainside itself, it was a masterpiece born from the land's own defenses. Tiamat let out a quiet breath of awe. Shinchi had been dazzling in its modernity, but this was different. This was beauty of another kind, like something straight out of an old fantasy film, except more tangible, more real. The stone walls, the rugged angles, the weight of craftsmanship all pressed into his senses. Compared to the countless castles of Yggdrasil, this fortress was beyond comparison, radiating a majesty he could feel. There. That's it. That is Fio Jula, the dwarves' final refuge. What? We're already here. Weren't we supposed to need half a day? The blessing was too strong, I suppose. Rohaim turned his head aside, unwilling to admit aloud that he, a mage, had gotten so carried away with running that he had lost track of time. Still, an early arrival was better than letting the god grow bored. Dean stole a glance at Tiamat, gauging his expression. It seems we've arrived. Yes, it does. Shall we go straight in? Rohaim. He answered quickly, more polite now than he had been hours earlier. In a society where strength ruled all, respect was the only natural response to power of this magnitude, and who knew what rewards might fall from currying favor with such a being? I don't see why not. We helped them just days ago, after all, and even lent them blessings. There shouldn't be any problem. Then let's go. I'd like to see the dwarves' city. Yes, sir. Colton, you led. They'll recognize you from a few days ago, so negotiations should go smoothly. Yes. Colton took the lead, the others following close behind. As they drew near the fortress, slits in the cliffside suddenly opened, hidden shutters swinging back to reveal watchful eyes. Who goes? Wait, is that Thunderblade and Sky Tempest? I thought you'd already departed. Yes, we had business and returned with our companions. Will you let us in? Companions, meaning those two behind you. Can you vouch for their identity? They are with us. That is enough, isn't it? Understood. Lower the lift. Quickly. The guard, flustered, shouted orders. The cliffside rumbled with noise as disguised stonework shifted, revealing what had seemed to be a natural wall. A heavy wooden and stone lift, braced with iron chains and pulleys, began its slow descent with a clatter. Tiamat's lips curled faintly. Compared to an elevator, this was crude beyond measure, yet that was what made it so delightful. It was like stepping straight into the kind of fantasy film he had once watched in another world. And then, his senses prickled. From somewhere within, beyond the walls, he felt a surge of malice, murderous intent that was not dwarven. His keen instincts caught the trace instantly, and excitement colored his face. What had begun as a casual whim, the simple desire to tour a dwarven city, now promised something greater. Perhaps another interesting event awaited him here. The lift creaked and swayed, carrying them steadily upward. Tiamat smiled. Joy swelled within him, overflowing until it almost felt like love. Yes, this world is wonderful. Far more wonderful than Yggdrasil could ever hope to be. 68 The World Seen by God 3. Chapter 68. The World Seen by God 3. As these thoughts passed through Tiamat's mind, the pulley rope finally reached its end with a clunk. The lift jolted slightly, shuddering before the front gate creaked open, revealing a narrow passageway. From within, a face framed by a wild, bristling beard poked out, the dwarf's sharp eyes scanning each of them in turn. His gaze swept over Colton and Rohaim, then lingered longer on Dean and Tiamat as though trying to etch their faces into memory. With a grunt, he withdrew, and the heavy inner door swung open. Torchlight flared, spilling a reddish glow down the narrow corridor. A voice called out. Over here. Mind your heads, humans, the passage was carved to our measure, so it may feel a bit cramped for you. Thank you for your consideration, Tiamat replied at once, bowing his head as he stepped forward. The others froze for half a heartbeat at the sight of him lowering his head so readily, but quickly followed suit, ducking down to enter the localing hall. A short trek through the dwarven-sized tunnel brought them to a sturdy wooden door. As it swung open, the sight that greeted Tiamat stole his breath. Ah! The lift exit stood at a height overlooking the city, and from the railing he could see almost all of Theo Jula spread out beneath him. From the outside, the dwarves' fortress blended seamlessly into the cliffs, little more than a strange outcropping of stone. But within, it was nothing less than the heart of their culture. Flake-roofed homes of cement and quarried stone clung to the cavern walls like a vast honeycomb. They were not neatly stacked like apartments, but layered haphazardly, one atop another, beside and across, like lumps of clay pressed into place, yet always leaving paths open. Staircases and winding walkways threaded between them, while ladders and small pulley lifts bridged gaps where no stairs existed. All around, stocky figures bustled tirelessly. Bearded dwarves hurried to and fro, their short legs moving faster than a man's stride, slipping past one another with practiced ease through the web of streets. Here and there, steam hissed from vents, and smoke curled from chimneys. Forges, perhaps, or workshops hammering out steel. Blacksmiths strode by with tongs and hammers as large as their own heads, their sweat-streaked faces glowing with firelight. It was a beauty unlike anything of mankind's making. Tiamat trembled with awe. This was why he had left Shinchi. This was what he had wanted to see. Not the artificial cultures of Yggdrasil, not the fantasy sets of film or anime, but the living, breathing culture of another people. He stood gazing in quiet wonder until Dean touched his shoulder gently. What troubles you? It's beautiful. Indeed. A fine city. Their culture is plain to see. Unlike humans, who would be lost without strict order and planning, the dwarves build as they need, and somehow, it never becomes chaos. Instead, it creates beauty. I see. Yes. This is good. Does it please you? Ha ha. Tiamat answered only with a laugh, following the dwarf ahead who gestured for them to proceed. Beautiful, it was undeniably beautiful, and it appealed to him. Yet, if someone asked him to live here, the answer would be different. Beauty is precious precisely because one only gazes upon it. Once submerged in that beauty, it becomes routine, and routine dulls wonder. So he did not voice that it pleased him. Someone might be listening. This way to the Regency Hall. They wound their way through narrow, twisting passages until a larger structure came into view. Unlike the cramped, stacked dwellings of the streets, this building stood apart. Even by dwarven standards, it was impressive, and to Tiamat, who had seen the towering structures of the modern world, it still counted as a sizable edifice, perhaps 5 stories tall. Its outer walls bore carvings not merely etched, but sculpted with such artistry that the building itself resembled a monument. Ah! Welcome. Welcome, Thunderblade, Sky Tempest, and your companions. As they approached, the guards at the entrance started in surprise, then saluted sharply and swung the doors wide. There were no checks, no suspicion, their passage owed entirely to Colton and Rohaim. Only a few days ago, they had performed a great service and left the dwarves indebted, the soldiers remembered well. Inside, they were guided into a modestly sized chamber. Modest to human eyes, but certainly not cramped by dwarven measure. Carved figurines adorned the shelves, and the furnishings bore an aged, dignified elegance. Clearly, this was a guest chamber for honored visitors. Where are we? I don't recall this place from before. Idiot, it's obviously a reception room. Quiet, both of you. At Dean's sharp word, silence fell. Even that brief exchange was enough to shift the balance of the room. The dwarves who had been watching twitched faintly at the sight of Dean, older, more seasoned than the others, commanding the group's focus. Moments later, a dwarf in dress finer than that of the soldiers entered the chamber. Welcome, honored guests of Dragon's Dream. I am the Supreme Commander of the Regency Council. He bowed first to Dean, the elder among them, then to Rohaim, Colton, and lastly to Tiamat, before taking a seat. At the mention of Dragon's Dream, Tiamat's eyes widened for an instant, his surprise barely masked. But the others were too intent on the commander to notice. Ah, it's good to see you again, Commander. Only a few days, but still. Yes, indeed, Dean added smoothly, a pleasure to meet again, Supreme Commander. Haha, I remain deeply grateful for what you did, Thunderblade, Sky Tempest, but may I have the honor of being introduced to your companions? Colton and Rohaim exchanged a glance, locked in a silent contest before Rohaim sighed and relented. This is Dean, our party leader. And over there, tight. A high cleric. Well met, Supreme Commander of the Dwarves. An honor. Oh ho. So you are the leader of Dragon's Dream, Sir Dean. And a high cleric at such a young age, most impressive indeed. The commander accepted it without suspicion. Unbelievable though it might seem, the presence of Dragon's Dream lent weight to every word. After all, Thunderblade and Sky Tempest had already shown power beyond heroes. That their party leader was here, and a youthful high cleric besides, only spoke of greatness hidden behind appearances. So then, may I ask what brings you to us today? Of course, as the benefactors of our people you will always be welcome, but I am curious why you have returned, this time with Dean and Tite accompanying you. Allow me to answer, Dean interrupted smoothly. We were given a new mission to survey the Azerlija range. I came to deliver that order. These two I gathered along the way as we descended. I see. And Tite. Our guest is a most precious one. Do not, under any circumstances, commit a discourtesy. Is that so? The Supreme Commander glanced about, picking up on the subtle tension. Something was off. Among the 4 visitors, 3 were Dragon's Dream. The 4th, this, Tite, stood apart. A high cleric, young in years, and yet treated with unusual reverence, could he be of noble birth? But then again, Dragon's Dream were the kind to shrug off even an emperor's summons. For them to defer like this. Well then, whatever business you bring, speak to me. Since we've joined together, I am responsible for these 2 as their party leader. Understood. Very well. Then, Lord Tite. Ah, me. The honorific grated on Tiamat. He'd grown used to irreverence from Ea, and even Monkey Spanner's formal respect had felt heavy. Now, being addressed with the utmost deference again was awkward. For now, I would like to explore the city. I see, Rohaim, Colton, attend him. Absolutely nothing must happen. Understood. Yes, sir. Yes. The 2 answered at once, their voices taut. Dean's skeptical glance followed them, then lowered once more. Then I leave them in your charge. Tour the city as you wish. I'll handle everything else. I'm in your debt. Of course. Wait, hold on, are we deciding this so suddenly? The Supreme Commander, startled at how quickly the matter had shifted into a sightseeing excursion, tried to object, only to freeze under the sudden flare of killing intent. Dean's gaze, sharp as a blade, pinned him where he sat. The chill that crept through the room stiffened every muscle, as though his entire body had turned to stone. Any other matters are to be discussed with me. Is that clear? Yes. The commander stammered like a chastened soldier. He had thought to test the waters, to probe his position, but he had forgotten. This man was the party leader of Dragon's Dream, the superior of those 2 monsters who had carved through thousands of enemies. That reality settled heavy in his chest. Meanwhile, Tiamat and the others slipped quietly out of the chamber. Only once the door had shut did the oppressive aura fade enough for the commander to find his voice again. Then, all. Not yet. A few words first. Dean's voice was ice. When we arrived, the men who met us looked desperate. Your soldiers, too, were unsettled. And then you, the Supreme Commander, one of the highest offices in this city, came to receive us personally. That alone speaks volumes. And yet the city itself runs as though nothing is amiss. So tell me, what crisis has truly befallen this place, and what is it you intend to ask of us? Start with the truth. Quote. Already, the city's facade had been pierced. Cold sweat ran freely down the commander's brow. Dean was no mere warrior, his perception cut just as keenly. With nowhere left to hide, the old dwarf slumped in his chair and began, at last, to confess the grim state of Fio Jula, their final bastion now cornered in a desperate plight. 69. The World Seen by God 4. Chapter 69. The World Seen by God 4. Leaving the audience with the Supreme Commander to Dean, Tiamat stepped out into the dwarf city streets. At first, the dwarves who noticed him gave wary or curious glances, but the moment their eyes shifted to the 2 following behind, Colton and Rohaim, they quickly looked away and instead greeted them warmly. Oh, Thunderblade. I thought you'd left. Haha, had some business and came back. Nothing serious happened while I was gone, I hope. Serious. Not at all. With the Quagga wiped out, it's only a matter of reclaiming our lost cities now. How's your blade? Shall I give it a polish? I only left 3 days ago. I'd be embarrassed if my edge dulled in that short a time. Haha. That's so. Well, if it ever wears, bring it to me and I'll sharpen it myself. Ha ha ha. Till then, we'll meet in the tavern. Our hero deserves a feast, on me. I'll hold you to that. Colton's easy smile and chatter blended smoothly with the bustle of the streets. He returned greetings, joked, and left laughter in his wake. Rohaim, on the other hand, barely waved in acknowledgement. His eyes never stopped scanning the crowds, every muscle taut with unease. That fool Colton. Does he expect me alone to guard this one? His jaw clenched. True, there was no immediate threat here. The dwarves all knew them as saviors, none would dare harm a companion of Thunderblade. But safety was never guaranteed. One careless mishap, one stray incident, if the boy before them were to be hurt. Rohaim's blood ran cold. Dean's promise of punishment rang in his ears. The man would make good on every word. Life would remain, yes, but it would be a life of agony and terror. No one doubted the horrors lurking in the depths of the Tob Great Forest. So Rohaim watched, every nerve sharpened, swearing silently, nothing will happen. Nothing can happen. Tiamat, meanwhile, strolled as though on holiday, utterly unbothered. He drank in the sights and sounds of the city, the thick smoke from forges, the heat of hammer on steel, the boisterous voices mingling with laughter and clamor. Complicated, but I like it, he mused. It had been a long time since he'd walked through the heart of a living, bustling crowd. In the old world, stepping outside meant smog and poisonous air. To find clean, vibrant places, you needed wealth and standing, shopping districts reserved for the middle and upper classes. His family hadn't been rich, but they were comfortable enough that his childhood held occasional visits to such spaces, modest but satisfying. All of that ended with the accident. Afterward, there were no outings, no fresh air. Only survival, clinging to machines, his body crippled and confined. Virtual worlds replaced reality, Yggdrasil became life itself. Even then, among thousands of avatars, there had been no real sense of presence. Sensory dampening, the hollow echo of simulated touch, the absence of genuine air and earth, it was always a joy tempered by longing. Now, every moment was different. New, exhilarating, endlessly fresh. This world never dulled. The joy was so sharp he wanted to savor it every day, forever. As that thought settled, he turned his head, pure chance, and his eyes fell on his companions, Colton, laughing with dwarves, and Rohaim, tense and watchful at his side. The names Thunderblade and Sky Tempest might have sounded like nothing more than ridiculous DQN nicknames, yet in this world, they were genuine titles, highly respected among adventurers. Seeing them walk behind him, treating him with such regard, Tiamat found himself recalling his earlier attitude. Wait, wasn't I acting rather arrogant back there? He was well over 200 years old, yet time had never truly sunk in. Mentally, he was still in his late 20s. That was why Dean's respectful speech and solemn politeness had felt so uncomfortable. But somewhere along the way, that discomfort faded. Now he accepted their honorifics and courtesy as if it were natural. Despite the youthful face he wore, he unconsciously began taking such treatment for granted. It struck him especially during his recent interactions. Dean, the others, even the Dwarven Supreme Commander, all had treated him as a matter of course. Is it because of the name? Somehow they're treating me as if I were one of their guildmates, or even an NPC bound to me. Dragon's Dream was one of the organizations created by Shinshi, the 12. According to Aya, it had originally been Bait, an external front to lure back defectors from Shinshi. Over 150 years, its role shifted. Should dangerous players appear in this world, Dragon's Dream would act as a tempting lure to draw them out. Even so, that alone made it one of the greatest organizations by human standards. He knew this well enough. Judging by what he'd seen, their strength was no bluff. The younger two looked mid-30s in level, while the older man might well be close to 50. Considering Aya had explained that most common folk never reached level 10, and that even most adventurers fell below 20, they truly were among the rarest of the strong. And yet, to Tiamat, they were still just part of an external organization, created by Shinshi. By extension, they were his. Everything belonging to Shinshi was his to command, including Dragon's Dream and its members. A good change, maybe. He tilted his head. As a guildmaster's mindset, it was correct. But here, in a world more real than reality itself, what attitude should he carry? He had no answer. Still, part of him whispered, why worry at all? In this fragile yet beautiful world, he held overwhelming power and influence. What did he have to fear? That quiet arrogance bled through despite himself. He pushed the thought aside. For now, he would enjoy this world. He had already given Aya her orders. Until he gathered more information, this would be both a reprieve and a game. He'd slept through 2 centuries, his true enjoyment began now. Hey, Colton. Big mug, the best brew, on the house if you stop in. Oh, but Malin the innkeep already promised me a round too. Colton. Ha ha ha, forgive us, sir, but we're on duty right now. At the interruption, Tiamat turned his head. A burly dwarf with a great beard was leaning from a tavern window, holding out a brimming tankard. The sign above the door had the leaky cask scrawled across it in crooked letters. The dwarf's face fell when he heard the excuse. Duty, What kind of duty? Don't tell me the Quagga are back again. No, nothing like that. We're guarding this gentleman. Guarding, huh, him. The dwarf's eyes roamed over Tiamat, stroking his beard as if weighing him up. Then he grinned wide. Oi, lad, ever been inside a tavern? A tavern? Yeah, a place that turns a boy into a man. So, care for a drink? His grin was all provocation, daring him. Rohaim looked ready to explode with protests, but Tiamat's intrigued expression froze the words in his throat. A man, you say, do you at least serve good liquor? Oh ho. That's right, our food might not suit human bellies, but our ale. Nothing finer. Come on, boy, step inside. We'll make a real man of you yet. With a booming, kuhahaha. The dwarf tipped back his mug, foam spilling as he poured the frothing ale into his wide mouth. Gulp, gulp, his Adam's apple bobbed furiously, the sound of swallowing loud enough to shake the air. Finally, with a satisfied, coo, he exhaled, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and grinned. Unconsciously, Tiamat swallowed hard. The sight of such hearty drinking made him crave something too, especially beer. How about it? Care for a drink? A tavern, I wonder if that's really alright. Taitsama, you're in the middle of sightseeing. Perhaps it'd be better to visit a tavern later. You haven't even seen all the streets yet, and stopping by a bar already might be a bit much. Rohaim was sweating bullets. A tavern. That was practically an accident waiting to happen. If they went in there, trouble was guaranteed. His keen mage's brain was blaring alarms, this will blow up. Danger ahead. Colton, on the other hand, seemed positively delighted at the idea, being the type who would happily follow his stomach anywhere. But Rohaim knew better. Taverns, and especially alcohol, were the very breeding ground of accidents. Sure, Tite had absurd abilities, so it wasn't like he'd actually get drunk, but what if he did? And what if, in that drunken state, he did something ridiculous? Then both Rohaim and Colton would be dragged straight into disaster. That could not be allowed. He had to stop this, no matter what. Yet, regardless of Rohaim's anxiety, Tiamat's expression clearly showed he was intrigued. Alcohol, you say, do you have beer? Beer. Of course we do. Just last year we brewed a special dark stout from premium barley grown on the Belarus plains. Aged in oak casks, mind you. We can't chill it, but who cares? The barrel's still sealed, untouched. And my rooftops got a decent view. Bit cluttered, but we can clear it up for you. Come on, it'll be worth your while. The dwarf, seeing Tiamat's wavering interest, poured oil on the fire, stoking his curiosity even further. With another hearty laugh and another gulp of ale, he sealed the deal. Sightseeing was fine and all, but the lure of a special dark stout was stronger. A premium beer from another world, aged in oak casks. He remembered his first beer back on Earth. Bitter, fizzy water that didn't taste particularly good. Later, as an adult, he'd grown to enjoy that bitterness, but after the accident, alcohol had become forbidden to him altogether. Even soda with a trace of alcohol was impossible. In Shinshi, he'd recently tried beer again. It was leagues apart from the ones in his old life, crisp, refreshing, perfect alongside potato chips. Maybe it was because he'd drunk it after waking from 200 years of slumber, but it had been sublime. And now, beer brewed in this world with rare ingredients. He wanted it. No, he needed it. Sightseeing was one thing, but seeing, eating, and drinking was another. To enjoy it all was the true way to savor this world. Very well, if you'll serve me that beer, I'll come along. As much as you like. Now that I've said it aloud, I can't resist either. Guess I'll be cracking that cask open tonight. Come, come, let me clear the rooftop for you. The dwarf's face and mug disappeared from the window with a clatter as he slammed the shutters shut. Moments later, a ruckus of banging and crashing came from above, furniture being shoved aside, by the sound of it. Before the noise had even settled, Tiamat was already pushing open the door to the tavern, the leaky cask, without hesitation. Colton, practically drooling, hurried after him, only to yelp as Rohaim smacked him on the back of the head. Special dwarven dark stout, gulp ow. What was that for? Swallowing your spit at a time like this. The situation's doomed already, we're finished. Rohaim's expression was bleak. A tavern. Who could have guessed such a trap lay in wait? He cursed the dwarf who'd extended the invitation. The fellow had probably only meant to repay a debt of gratitude to the city's saviors, but still, this was the last kind of favor they needed. And yet, what choice did he have? At least Tite was a high priest. Even if he did get drunk, surely he could cleanse himself with a spell. And surely no drunkards would dare pick a fight with them, heroes of the city. Clinging to that fragile hope, Rohaim followed them into the leaky cask, his face twisted in despair. 70. The World Seen by God 5. Chapter 70. The World Seen by God 5. Pushing open the low, creaking wooden door of the leaky cask, the first thing Tiamat noticed were the swaying lanterns casting their flickering glow inside. Since no sunlight reached this mountain city, windows were useless. Instead, lanterns hung from the ceiling here and there, their reddish flames bathing the tavern in a dusky glow. Then the smell hit him. Oil-soaked timber, layers of stale dust, a faint musk of sweat and something sour. It was hardly the fragrance one expected of a place that served food. Yet, in its own way, the stench was strangely captivating. Feels just like the Middle Ages. Or, maybe this is the real thing. Tiamat's mind wandered back to the days of Yggdrasil. Among its millions of players, plenty had enjoyed roleplay builds, picking a concept, building their avatars around it, and acting accordingly. Especially in a fantasy MMO like Yggdrasil, adopting a medieval adventurer's persona was practically the norm. Many even went so far as to wear patched leather armor, battered shields, longswords, and ragged cloaks, speaking in archaic tones like, thou, and, forsooth. Entire communities had flourished around that shared aesthetic. But this was different. The wavering lantern light, the pungent reek, the drunken laughter and curses echoing from every corner, this was real. No system could replicate the tactile, lived-in, quality he was experiencing now. Movies set in the Middle Ages never captured this. They showed sweeping castles, grand battlefields, or glittering CGI fantasy, but never this. The reek of old beer, the guttural snores of drunks slumped on tables, the disorderly yet vibrant chaos of a dwarf tavern. His eyes roamed the room, dwarves bellowing as they downed their drinks, others silently spooning greasy stew, and a few collapsed across the tables, red-faced and muttering in their sleep. It was lawless, crude, and decadent, but also fascinating. Quit gawking. Don't mind the drunks. If they notice you, they'll snatch up all the premium stout I set aside. Quick, upstairs. Ah, yes. Premium stout, gulp. You. Never mind. Just keep quiet. That's safer. Following their guide, they climbed toward the rooftop. Halfway up, there was a dull thunk followed by a hollow reverberation. What? Are you alright? Why yes, I'm fine. He'd accidentally slammed his head into the low ceiling beam while climbing. He rubbed the spot reflexively, though there was no pain. Instead, his sharp eyes caught the absurd sight of the wood itself dented inwards from the impact. He sighed inwardly. Of course, his durability carried over even here. He'd suspected it back when he breathed dragonfire, but seeing the ceiling cave under his skull was still embarrassing. Don't mind it. We built these halls to suit our size, not lanky humans. Should have warned you sooner. Is your head alright? Shall I fetch a bandage? No, truly, I'm fine. If anything, I should be the one apologizing. Apologizing for what? Nothing. Forget I said anything. Tiamat averted his gaze. If word spread that the ceiling cracked while his skull stayed intact, he'd be branded, Stonehead, forever. No thank you. What happened? Taitsama, are you unharmed? The sound was so loud, are you sure you're okay? Behind him, Colton and Rohaim rushed over in a panic. They'd heard the impact as clearly as a hammer blow and looked terrified that he might be offended. Yes, I'm fine. My head's tougher than it looks. If you say so. Still, it looked painful. I'm glad to hear you're unharmed. Oh, to speak of healing magic in front of Taitsama, ha, what a foolish thought. Ha ha ha. Tiamat laughed lightly, brushing it off. Tiamat let out a soft laugh. Of course he did, based on what he'd seen so far. Rohaim's strength was at best around the 5th or 6th tier of magic, which meant a pure caster might reach somewhere in the upper 20s to low 30s in level. With hybrid classes, perhaps the 40s. Admirable by this world's standards, but compared to a max-level player like Tiamat, pitifully small. Perhaps his chuckle sounded like mockery, because Rohaim's face shriveled like an empty wineskin. Are you laughing at me? No, not at all, Tiamat replied gently. I only meant, see. I wasn't hurt in the slightest. That's all my laughter meant. I see. Unconvinced but with no way to argue, Rohaim sighed and settled himself down. Colton followed, and Tiamat sat with them at the rooftop table. Though only 2 stories high, the clustered architecture of the dwarves' city meant this rooftop perched much higher than it seemed. From here, one could look down over almost the entire fortress. Wisps of steam, firelight, and smoke curled into the air, vanishing into the faint shafts of sunlight that managed to reach the cavern's ceiling. Almost like a hot spring in winter, Tiamat mused, watching the mist drift upward. Of course, he'd never actually been to one in real life, the thought came from VR memories and scraps of knowledge. Then came the heavy clatter of straining stairs, followed by the appearance of a dwarf, face red with exertion, hauling up a barrel that looked half his size. Here it is. My pride and joy, stout brewed from barley of the Valurus plains. Beer. Colton blurted, already lunging. Hey! Rohaim snapped, glaring daggers until Colton sheepishly backed off. Both glanced at Tiamat. He only smiled faintly and lifted a finger. A pale blue glow seeped from his hand into the barrel. The dwarf nearly dropped it in shock, but Colton dove to catch it and heaved it onto the table. Cold. Colton yelped, jerking his hands back. The dwarf tried it too, and his calloused palms recoiled instantly. The cask, lukewarm just moments ago, now radiated the chill of ice as if buried in a glacier. All eyes turned to Tiamat. He shrugged lightly, smiling as though embarrassed. Doesn't everyone say beer's best chilled? I just took the liberty of helping. Was that too presumptuous? Presumptuous. Ha. That's a fine trick, lad. You fit right in with these heroes. Ha ha ha. The dwarf clapped Tiamat on the back so hard it echoed like a drum, but Tiamat didn't budge an inch. Rohaim glared again, half expecting an explosion, but the boy only smiled serenely. At last, Rohaim exhaled in relief. Maybe things wouldn't go so badly after all. All right then, let's crack it open. Hurrah! I'm looking forward to this. The cask was tapped, frothy foam bubbling up as the sharp, roasted scent of stout filled the air. Thin shards of ice floated amid the foam, glistening. The tavernkeeper dipped a battered metal-rimmed mug into the barrel and pulled it out brimming with beer. The fragrance alone made mouths water. Colton and Rohaim quickly grabbed their mugs. All eyes turned to Tiamat. Taitsama, would you do the honors? Then I shall. With gratitude. Tiamat lifted his mug. Then I'll have the next round. Each of them dipped their mugs into the cask, scooping up stout topped with foam and drifting shards of ice. The sharp aroma of roasted malt and hops filled the rooftop, and in this city of smoke and forges, the air around them felt like the heart of a snowy mountain peak. They raised their mugs and clashed them together. To victory. The shout overlapped before anyone could say otherwise, and the drinking bout began. A few dozen minutes later. Rohaim, who had finally let himself relax, leaned back and admired the view below while savoring the finest dwarven stout. Yet something nagged at him. Between rounds of drinking, the dwarf innkeeper had gone below to fetch some greasy stew, then came back up with it, and then, what happened after that? The stout was stronger than expected, and Rohaim's tolerance wasn't great. His head spun as he tried to piece together the memory. So you see. Yes, that's how it is. We dwarves were driven from the capital, beaten again and again by those beast bastards until we were forced to retreat here. Even now, we can barely hold them off. The future looks grim. That was it, the innkeeper drunkenly ranting, pouring his grievances out. And Taitsama, calm, sober, listening patiently, nodding in understanding. And then, Rohaim's eyes snapped open. Wait, who is still here? Colton, who had downed a single glass of the innkeeper's fire liquor and promptly collapsed unconscious. The innkeeper himself, slumped over the table after alternating between laughter and sobs. Rohaim, left woozy but still barely awake. And Taitsama. Where did he go? Rohaim shot to his feet and shouted. Gone. Nowhere in sight. The most important person to guard, vanished, leaving nothing behind but an empty seat. His knees buckled, and he sank back down, not from the drink but from sheer dread. Of course, for someone like that boy, disappearing without a trace would be child's play. But Roham hadn't noticed, hadn't heard a reason, and worst of all, he had no idea if or when he would return. Wild-eyed, Roham scanned the rooftop, but there was no sign of him. In the end, he slumped toward the cask, desperately checking if any beer was left. Fortunately, there was. He filled his mug, and in order to blot out his panic, he tipped it back, letting the foamy cold wash away his thoughts. Please, he prayed silently, when my senses return, let him be back here. 71 Because it is all too fragile. 1. Chapter 71. Because it is all too fragile. 1. A black shadow streaked across the skies above the dwarven city. In the blink of an eye, Tiamat vanished from the rooftop, leapt across the streets, and reached the city walls, all in barely a minute, using nothing but raw physical strength. No magic, no skills, no abilities, just pure muscle. Faint sunlight trickled down. Below, steam and smoke rose while the clamor of voices echoed up. Together, they filled the air with a strangely pleasant vigor. Yes, it felt good. The exhilaration lifted Tiamat's spirits higher and higher. Right now, Tiamat was riding the peak of euphoria. A body that never tired, brimming with vitality and power. A fantasy world he thought could only exist in imagination. An endless expanse of pristine and beautiful nature. He had said it before, and he would say it again, this other world was the best. On top of that, he had explored the dwarves' city, crude but charming in its own way, and been treated to fine drink. If he weren't in high spirits, that would have been stranger. Only the food put the brakes on his joy. Here, try it. My tavern's proud specialty stew. Oh, thank you kindly. Lord Tight, is something wrong? No, nothing at all. He forced a smile at the time, but couldn't stop the twitch at the corner of his lips. What on earth was that greasy, charred mess? The dried meat had twisted into hardened knots in the oil, as if screaming in agony. The vegetables had withered into limp, lifeless shreds. And when he asked if they had any seasonings, the innkeeper proudly brought out shriveled garlic chips and a blackish-gray salt that looked more like ground rock than spice. Yes, he knew spices were precious in medieval times, but he hadn't wanted to learn it this way. The rancid stench alone was proof enough. Instinctively, Tiamat rummaged through his inventory, only to despair at finding mountains of gold, jewels, rare items, and valuable consumables, but no foodstuffs, no spices. When he asked for something else, they brought a rank stew, a watery soup, and bread so hard it was indistinguishable from stone. Crunching down on the rock-hard loaf with the force of his jaws left the dwarves, Colton, and Roham all wide-eyed, but it still tasted terrible. Bread half-burnt in a soot-stained oven, without yeast, sugar, salt, butter, or oil, it wasn't bread, it was just a lump of baked flour. In the end, while the others smacked their lips and praised the greasy stew and stone bread, Tiamat could only drink beer. The sharp, chilled flavor washed away the grease and soot from his mouth, restoring his mood. The rounds of beer kept coming. At first, they admired the view of the city below, but as the alcohol flowed, conversation drifted toward small talk. Walls of formality melted under the influence of drink, until they were openly chatting about anything and everything. Of course, Tiamat couldn't actually get drunk. Even in a different form, his level 100 stats, passive skills, and equipment were unchanged. He could drink a ton of near-pure alcohol and barely feel a buzz. A few mugs of beer were nothing. Still, he felt good. The fine taste of beer, the scenery, the fresh new world, all of it lifted his spirits. On top of that, the dwarves' culture fueled his love for fantasy, and the beer was far better than expected. In short, he was intoxicated by the atmosphere. And then came the dwarves' laments, which acted as fuel for the fire. Because of those beasts, it's been nothing but trouble lately. Ah, you mean the Quagga are still giving you grief? Yes. Thanks to you dealing with their raid, we've had a breather, but the air is still strange. The higher UPS are clearly hiding something. I don't like the feel of it. Have you heard anything? I've got suspicions, but nothing I can say for sure. I see, well, as long as you've come back, I suppose we've nothing to fear. Listening to the back and forth, Tiamat's curiosity stirred. Excuse me, but, what exactly are Quagga? Quagga. Ah, if you've never seen them, it makes sense you wouldn't know. They're a subspecies of beastmen, ratfolk of a kind. They can't handle sunlight or cold, so they live entirely underground. They consume minerals to strengthen their bodies, and they have just enough intelligence to form tribal societies. To us dwarves, they were never much of a threat, until a few years ago, when they suddenly began organizing in massive numbers. Thanks to that, we dwarves ended up in this sorry state. I see, then, if they were to disappear, what would happen? Disappear. Well, we'd reclaim our lost cities and work toward prosperity again, of course. Why do you ask? Are you planning to help us? Depending on my mood. Bah, don't be so frivolous. You look like a noble's son. Even if you've got guards, you can't just act as you please. If you're here to sightsee, then sit quietly, take a look, and leave. Thinking it mere drunken rambling, the innkeeper of the leaky cask let out a scoffing laugh, his beard quivering, and went back to chugging his beer. That dismissive attitude struck a chord in Tiamat. Perhaps trivial to others, but to him it was enough. Enough of a reason to move. Enough of a spark to act. So he did. And just as he had told the dwarf, he felt like stretching his strength a little. Ha! When will those bastards attack, I wonder? If you're tired, go take a nap. I'll keep watch. But still, it's been 2 days already, hasn't it? Once you return, I'll get some rest too. Fine. I'll leave it to you, then. Vaulting onto the city wall, Tiamat slipped past the guards and hurled himself into the dark beyond. Yet not a single dwarf on watch even noticed. The gap in power was simply too vast, their senses couldn't even register the disturbance. To so much as catch a glimpse of his shadow would require at least a 9th tier detection spell from a high-level magic caster, or an 8th stage sensory skill, and unfortunately, no dwarf in the city possessed such power. If they had, they wouldn't be losing ground to Quaggoa in the first place. Landing silently beyond the walls, Tiamat gazed into the distance. From the depths of the cavern came eerie howls, broken mutterings, and guttural cries. Confirming this, Tiamat whispered into the dark. You hear me? No one was there. No presence stirred. His senses told him he was utterly alone, yet he called again. Aya, do you hear me? Still no reply. His words scattered hollowly into the air. But then Tiamat's tone hardened. This time, it was not a call but a command. This is an order. Answer my summons, Aya. Power infused his words, stilling the air, scattering dust, sending faint tremors through the silence. A few seconds of tense stillness passed. For a moment, Tiamat wondered if he had imagined things. Foolish, really. Even for a stalker as obsessive as Aya, this was too much to assume. He almost muttered an apology to the empty air, when a calm voice brushed against his ear. Did you know all along, my master? Quote, exclamation mark. Ah, of course. I knew everything from the very start. He spoke evenly, but it was pure bluff. In truth, he had nearly cried out in shock. Only by sheer force of will had he kept his composure. Cold sweat trickled beneath his armor. If one were to lift his robe now, gooseflesh would be plain to see. The apology he had meant to offer Aya was swallowed back. So it was true. Against all odds, his wild suspicion had caught her. The improbable had become reality. From the very start, you say, then all those clumsy, awkward moments, were they all just an act? Naturally. Merely a performance, nothing more. A lie, plain and simple. But with the absolute loyalty an NPC held toward their master, she would believe it. Even so, Tiamat felt a flicker of guilt. I see. Well, I must admit, I rather liked that cute side of you. I thought it suited you, my master. Is that so? So tell me, how did you find out? I was certain you'd never notice. Isn't it obvious? You think I'd go out alone and not expect to be watched? Of course something felt off. Yes, it had been in that conversation with the dwarf innkeeper. The man had said he seemed like someone of high birth. Perhaps the dwarf thought him merely a noble's son with escorts. But when Tiamat looked back on himself, he realized, he was something far rarer. Something far more precious. He was the hidden master of a city whose power could sway the world, the one who governed all of Shinshi, wielding authority beyond kings or gods. Life and death, immortality itself, such gifts or denials lay in his hands. At least, that was how all within Shinshi saw him, the image of the absolute god, Tiamat. Of course, Aya probably knew fragments of his true self, but she was wholly bound to him. The 12 priests, even if created by other hands, now answered solely to him. And under them, every NPC, every subject, lay under his dominion. In other words, Shinshi was Tiamat. Without him, Shinshi could not exist. He alone commanded Aya, the system's core, and as guildmaster he was the axis upon which all turned. Should Tiamat vanish, it would mark the end of Shinchi itself. NPCs ruling in his stead. Impossible. Even with guild systems intact, the foundation was the guild items, and only the guildmaster could wield them. Without the player, the guild was but an empty shell. And yet, to allow him to wander outside without surveillance. That was unthinkable. In Shinchi, even the strongest guardians would always keep him in sight. His existence was far too important. But what if someone were always watching, closer than any guard? His thoughts leapt to Aya. As an NPC bound to a guild item, perhaps she was watching through that very bond. The idea had been a half-hearted guess when he first spoke aloud, but it had proven true. If not, it would have been nothing but muttering to himself. But since he had been right, it meant he had a constant, hidden safeguard. A little unsettling to think of, but at least he wasn't alone. So you noticed me from that line of thought. As expected of you, my master. Don't call me that. From now on, yes, call me master. Master. That has a fine ring to it, my master. I said, master. Yes, master, what do you need of me? And stop that voice. Just speak plainly, with respect. Understood, master. The shift from coy sweetness to formal clarity made Tiamat shiver, but at least it settled his nerves. He drew in a steadying breath. I intend to use a bit of power. Will that cause any issues? Ah, so the dwarves have caught your favor, have they? Yes. I wish to aid them in their plight. What do you think? From what I've observed, there are no other players or related presences nearby. He hadn't been entirely careless. While traveling with the others, he had kept detection active, and in the dwarven city he had watched closely, revealing himself only as much as he judged safe. But remembering Aya unsettled him. His body, his mind, his confidence, all had been sharpened since arriving in this world. But if other players had undergone the same transformation, that was a concern. That was why he sought her counsel. As you judge, master, no other players or connected forces are present. Since you departed Shinchi, you are unobserved. Do as you please. Let your strength, your majesty, even a fragment of your wrath, descend upon those creatures who dare provoke you. So it is as I thought. Good. The last trace of hesitation vanished. He would act. He pondered which power to call upon, then decided. Among the countless spells, skills, and functions at his command, one stirred his curiosity. How would it manifest in this world? The incantation began. A burning red magic circle flared to life, engulfing him, expanding into intricate three-dimensional form. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then 3. Each heartbeat swelled with rising power. The wall of stone shielded the glow from the city's side, but across the cavern, where the Quagga gathered, a commotion stirred. They could see the blazing light, yet had no means to respond. Their cries echoed uselessly. And then the spell reached completion. Come forth, my legion, dragon strike. 72, because it is all too fragile too. Chapter 72, because it is all too fragile too. Crimson surged forth. It was not fire, yet it burned brighter than flame, a radiant scarlet blaze. The rising crimson energy seared the darkness, filling the cavern and drawing a vast circle across the air, its center dyed in deeper red and shadow. This was a kind of gate, but of a lineage different from ordinary ones. Most gates simply connect 2 points within a certain distance. A higher tier, the Dimension Gate, could bypass most restrictions and link any 2 spaces within the same world. But this was different. This was not a door within one world, but a rift to another, calling forth beings beyond. It was a summoner's art, the astral portal, a dimensional gate that bridged to another plane. From within, the Legion emerged. The first sight was crimson, vast, overwhelming crimson. Under the glow of the portal, ruby-like scales gleamed. Black horns jutted skyward. Between the armor-like plates of its hide, golden eyes flashed, slit pupils burning with predatory light. Its form was a harmony of curves and jagged edges, beauty perfected in monstrous scale. Behind its tightly closed jaws, between its fangs, shimmered the mirage of fire. An adult red dragon. Even a single one could reduce a city to ash, raise nations, and plunge the world into terror, the apex of phantasmal beasts. And yet this was only the first. No incantation so grand would summon but one. In Yggdrasil, magic took countless forms. Beyond the root branches of divine and necromantic spells, there were offshoots innumerable, sorcery, in Myoto, and more. But apart from them all, there existed something else. Spells of power surpassing even the highest tier, super tier magic, or magic defined as skills. For example, unlocking the world-class item World Disaster at its peak granted access to the skillspell Grand Catastrophe. Beyond classification, some players gave these anomalous powers their own name, borrowed from the lore of the old game upon which Yggdrasil was built, epic spells. The magic now invoked was one of those. Normally, the class Dragon Knight at max level allowed the summoning of a single dragon of level 70 strength, bound to serve for a short time. But for one who had obtained the class Dragon Lord, a greater power was unlocked. Epic spell, Dragon Strike. The spell demanded 5 full minutes of chanting, and lasted only 5 minutes more. Yet in that brief span, it summoned a legion of dragons, each of level 70 or higher, a force unrivaled among summoning arts. From beyond the portal came a thunderous sound like war drums, like mountains struck again and again. Gigantic golden eyes, larger than a child's body, gleamed from the darkness, flashing as they pressed forward. Behind the first black-horned red dragon followed another of equal size, its horns white as bone. Then another, and another, each pushing through the astral portal, each enormous body forcing its way into this world. Beneath the shadows of the mountains, the Crimson Legion appeared. The earth quaked. The land writhed in terror. The cavern, once cool, suffocated with searing heat. 1, 2, 3, in mere moments 10 red dragons stood in formation. 10 adults, each body stretching more than 10 meters, their presence alone enough to smother the world in crimson dread. One dragon could annihilate armies. 10 surpassed the limits of mortal comprehension. It was a true legion, the Legion of Dragons. At their head, the first black-horned red dragon lowered its massive head to the ground before Tiamat. Give us your command, O Lord. Its head alone was several meters long, its sheer weight pressing down on the cavern like a collapsing mountain. Yet Tiamat felt no burden, no pressure. The gale from the dragon's bow whipped his hair wildly, but his face betrayed no fear. Behind the curtain of golden hair, his eyes trembled faintly, but the dragons did not see. Lord, is it? You would name me master, then. Am I to take it as such? Of course. We are bound to obey the will of our Lord in all things. The great dragon's head dipped once more, and the 9 behind it followed in unison. Merely the act of 10 colossal heads bowing together stirred a gale like a typhoon. It was a sight grand and magnificent, yet Tiamat became aware of something startling. He was perfectly calm. This is, honestly, just troublesome. His mind was awhirl. The Dragon Legion before him, their thunderous voices calling him, Lord, the stormforce winds from their bows, all of it was chaos. But what unsettled him most was not them. It was himself. His heart did not race. Most people, faced with such a sight, would be unable to suppress their pounding hearts, whether in awe, pride, fear, or sheer thrill at such overwhelming obedience. But Tiamat's pulse beat as steadily as ever, perhaps a touch faster, but nowhere near the frantic thrum one might expect. By contrast, he remembered the moments when it had. The first time he opened his eyes in this world. When he met the crying monkey Spanner. When he encountered Aya. When he gazed upon Shinchi. When a sudden breath attack had nearly struck him. In those moments, his chest had truly pounded. That feeling of shock and raw bewilderment was unforgettable. But since then, his thrills had dulled. The joy of walking free beneath open skies. Meeting the dragon's dream adventuring party. Drinking in the beauty of nature, the strength of his new body, the bustling dwarf city, or even the taste of fine beer, these brought happiness, yes, but not enough to send his heart racing. Now, staring at 10 red dragons kneeling before him, he felt only one emotion, irritation. His mind told him he should be awed, overwhelmed. Yet his heart whispered only, what a bother. He even regretted summoning them. Why? Before him stood a scene beyond fantasy films, an army of true dragons offering him fealty. Any mortal would tremble with exaltation. But Tiamat's body refused to respond. What is this feeling? Just, troublesome. Annoyance prickled within him. And so, he chose to vent that annoyance in the simplest way possible. He had summoned them, after all. If the summoning worked, surely dismissal would as well. With that lazy thought, he gave his first command. Then, fine. Eradicate the Quaggoa. The words slipped out casually, words that might spell the extinction of an entire race. Yet he was barely aware of it. To him it was like crushing ants beneath his heel, or swatting mosquitoes that buzzed too close. But when the red dragons did not move, his expression darkened. They merely glanced at one another nervously, massive bodies shifting awkwardly, even curling their tails. The sight was pathetic, so far from the majesty they had shown moments ago, it made him scowl. What are you waiting for? I told you, destroy the Quaggoa. Forgive us, Lord, but, what are these, Quaggoa? Quote. Tiamat closed his eyes tightly. Of course. There were no monsters by that name in Yggdrasil. Similar creatures perhaps, but nothing called Quagga. These dragons, born of that world, could not possibly know. He himself would have been equally puzzled, had the dwarves not explained it to him earlier. Fools, I didn't even think of that. He grimaced, realizing how foolish he must have seemed, posturing only to trip over a gap in knowledge. The dragons, unsettled by their lord's displeasure, rolled their massive golden eyes anxiously. Lord, forgive us. Our wisdom is lacking, we could not fully grasp your will. Enough. Forget it. I'll give another command. Half lowering his head, Tiamat pointed away from the dwarven fortress, toward the echoing roars beyond. The arrival of the dragons had clearly stirred the enemy, whose howls now rose even louder in the distance. Their noise grated on his already frayed nerves. There, over there. The creatures making that racket. Wipe out the ones that look like them. He paused, reconsidering. If they slew them all, would that mean extinction? Quagga fed on minerals, adapted their pelts to survive, they might be useful, perhaps. And though only monsters, it seemed reckless to erase a whole race over an idle order. He hesitated, then adjusted his command. Not all. Just enough to silence the noise. Cull them until they no longer offend me. We hear and obey, Lord. We hear and obey. This time, the 10 red dragons responded at once, spreading their vast wings. Winds howled through the cavern as they unfurled, fire seething between their fangs. They bowed their heads once more to Tiamat, then surged skyward in a storm. Lightning split the air. Flames rained down. Screams rose, turned to howls, then to silence. Listening to the chaos fade into stillness, Tiamat sighed softly, turned on his heel, and made his way back toward the leaky cask, where he had left his place. 73 Because it is all too fragile 3. Chapter 73. Because it is all too fragile 3. In the Azerlija mountain range, 8 clans of Quagga once dwelled. The Pyramid, Purildr, Perslix, Porum, Pashunum, Pogazua, Zuigan, and Zariushk. These clans claimed descent from the names of their 8 ancestral forebears, 3 clans bearing the lineage of the ancient hero Pu, and the others tracing their blood to Po and Zu, rivals who once contended with him. Each clan numbered around 10,000 Quagga, give or take. Together, nearly 80,000 of them carved their homes into the vast caverns and tunnels beneath the mountains. Such numbers were rare across the continent. Quagga were not found only here, but nowhere else had they flourished with such strength. The endless caves and hollows beneath Azerlija, shielded from sun and storm, allowed them to thrive. Yet to call them strong would be misleading. Though one clan might boast 10,000, their civilization was primitive. Among the denizens of the mountains, they ranked low, more often prey than predator to stronger beasts. Their greatest enemies were not monsters, but each other. Often, rival clans fought. At times, even within a single clan, factions turned against one another. Monsters regarded Quagga merely as prey, and though their fur, fangs, and claws lent them some defense, their small frames left them helpless against the truly powerful creatures of the mountains. Predators did not count as enemies. But rival clans were another matter. The cause lay in their very growth. A Quagga's abilities as an adult depended on the ores it consumed in childhood. To make their bloodlines stronger, clans competed fiercely for rare minerals. And it was the nearby rivals that proved the most troublesome. The dwarves, too, were enemies, contending for ore. Yet armed with enchanted weapons, the dwarves often drove the Quagga away. But a generation ago, everything changed. A Quagga was born whose might eclipsed even the greatest heroes of their ancient legends. This was the unified clanking, Periyuro. His strength outstripped all others, and with overwhelming power, he brought the scattered clans beneath his rule. Periyuro's greatness was not brawn alone. Unlike the brutish intellect of common Quagga, he possessed cunning knowledge and the wisdom to wield it. He discovered an abandoned dwarven city and claimed it, gathering his clans within and raising them to prosperity. He used dwarven captives to develop agriculture and animal husbandry. From that foundation, his power grew. He stored all resources in a royal treasury, distributing them carefully to inspire loyalty. He avoided wasteful wars, preferring negotiation, compromise, or duels between chieftains, methods that shed the least Quagga blood. In time, nearly every clan of Azerlija bent to his rule. By his command, the strongest of each clan were chosen. 2,000 warriors from every lineage, forming a host of 16,000. Never before had such an army of Quagga existed. Yet even this force could not storm the dwarves' stone fortresses. Quagga hands were ill-suited to tools, their claws and fur making weapons unwieldy. So they fought barehanded, and even then, they were often repelled by dwarves. Thus Periyuro adopted a different strategy. With sheer numbers, he encircled the dwarves, cutting them off and starving them slowly. 6,000 Quagga were sent forth as a vanguard under 3 clan chieftains to seal the front lines, while the rest closed the retreat. In this way, the dwarves were ground down, until at last, only a single fortress remained. It would not be long now before the dwarves were utterly annihilated. The Quagga, nursing their ancient grudges, whispered among themselves, giddy with the thought of the sweet revenge soon to come. But that grand design was shattered by only 2 humans. Ha! A hunt. Stay sharp, Quagga everywhere. One mistake and we're surrounded and dead. Ha! As if this rabble could ever beat me, Colton. Just watch my back, Rohaim. You idiot. The humans were strong. Most Quagga never once set foot outside the Azerlija mountains. Only a few chieftains or high officers had glimpsed humans before, the furtive wanderers at the mountain's edge, or the scouts daring to tread into their range. Encounters were rare, and when Quagga captured them, humans were usually nothing more than food. To Quagga who knew them, humans were noisy, tender-fleshed, frail prey. But these humans, they were something else entirely. At first, a few Quagga officers licked their lips at the thought of soft meat and rushed them. Those Quagga died before they realized their folly. Likely, the 2 had come in answer to the dwarves' plea for aid, but their strength was so great, the word, human, barely applied. One wielded a great sword wreathed in lightning, swung so fast it was almost invisible. To Quagga, lightning was death itself, natural predator. The other unleashed waves of fire, mercilessly scouring the creatures whose bodies could not endure sudden heat. Striking without warning, the pair cut into Quagga ranks again and again, escaping before retaliation. In only a few months, the toll grew catastrophic. At last, the enraged clanking Periyuro himself took the field, vowing to crush them. Against a single warrior, he might have triumphed. But together, lightning and flame united, their power overwhelmed even him. Periyuro, strongest of Quagga, suffered grievous wounds and was driven into retreat with his retainers. Now, in what had once been the dwarves' capital, the second largest hall, the grand chamber that once housed their merchants' guild, had become the Quagga royal palace. In its deepest chamber, King Periyuro reclined against soft, oversized cushions. His body was swathed in torn cloth strips steeped in herbal poultices. From time to stave off boredom, he reached into a servant's basket, plucked out a squealing lizard, and crunched it between his jaws. The tang of blood, the smell of entrails, the tender flesh and crunch of bone, all brought a smile to the warlord's lips. Tasty. My thanks, sire, murmured the servant with a bow. Ignoring him, Periyuro brushed a claw over his bandaged wounds. A week had passed since that battle. The injuries were nearly healed now, thanks to secret Quagga medicines, crude bandages, a week's seclusion, and his own indomitable vitality, fitting for the pinnacle of his race. Yet until they closed, he had been uneasy. If those 2 humans had continued their raids, he might have been forced to withdraw, or worse, seek aid from the monsters he despised. But they had not appeared again. Perhaps their contract had ended, or they had quarreled with the dwarves and left. Perhaps they, too, had grown weary, and the trackers he sent after them had managed to wound them deeply, as he himself had been wounded. So much the better. Next time, he would not lose. Periyuro felt stronger now, hardened by battle. Lightning and flame, he felt he had grown more resistant to both. The next clash, he swore, he would crush them head-on. But even he could do nothing about the cold. Those damned dragons. His gaze turned to the window. Beyond it loomed the dwarves' royal citadel, even greater than the palace he had seized. Within it dwelled the beings he hated most, the dragons. They regarded Quagga as nothing more than slaves, tools to be spent and discarded. Yet there was no resisting them. Dragons were the supreme race of this world. Even in lands too harsh for any other life, creatures would adapt, but in the frozen extremes of the Azerlija range, only dragons reigned unchallenged. Here, too, they stood as absolute rulers. For lesser beings, the mountains teemed with merciless monsters. But for dragons, mightiest of all life, the land itself bent to their dominion. The dragon that reigned above them was known as the Frost Dragon. Born with shimmering blue scales, they grew paler with age, white as snow, or clear as glacial ice. As a race, they possessed absolute immunity to cold. Their most terrifying weapon, the breath of dragons, carried with it a killing frost, and even the spells they wove were steeped in the blessing of eternal ice. To the Quagga, who feared cold more than anything, subjugation was inevitable. They borrowed the dragon's authority, basked in their shadow, and called it an honor. Yet resentment simmered. The frost dragons ruled with crushing arrogance, demanding tribute so vast it beggared entire clans. Grateful servitude was impossible when every boon came at the cost of ruin. Someday, Periyuro swore, someday even they will kneel. If not in his own lifetime, then in that of his children, or their children's children. His eyes burned with ambition that spanned generations. But already, far from his sight, that ambition was unraveling. The Quagoa clans sensed nothing. Their civilization was primitive. Only recently had they managed to gather into something resembling a nation. A king, vassals, subjects, all the trappings of rule were present, yet the veneer of savagery clung to them still. They had seized the dwarves' capital, striving to absorb its technologies. But instead of advancement, the effort only proved how socially stunted their race remained. They were monsters at heart, brutal, poor in intellect, incapable of creating true culture, and utterly barren of magic. Even united, they distrusted each other. Without the will of the great leader Periyuro, the 8 clans would never have been anything more than scattered tribes. Thus, their communications were crude, messages scratched onto hides, or shouted across caverns. Which is why they were blind to the calamity descending upon them. Flame fell without a sound. No screams rose before life was snuffed out. Death spread silently through their warrens, unnoticed until too late. What is this? A sudden wave of heat snapped Periyuro upright. He tore the bandages from his body, glared about the chamber, then rushed to the window. There, splitting the skies, was a tide of crimson. A red dragon. He recognized them at once. They resembled the frost dragons he was forced to serve, yet stockier, denser, radiating a power even more terrible than cold. His eyes bulged. From the heavens, white death rained down like judgment. The red dragons, summoned by their master, had only a brief time in this world. And so, they meant to carry out his command with flawless perfection. They had already failed once, forcing their lord to retract his first order out of their ignorance. The shame of that failure burned them still. They would atone with slaughter. One dragon struck first, crushing scores of Quagoa beneath its talons, flattening dozens more with a single sweep of its tail, then exhaling a flood of fire that engulfed the cavern. 10 dragons repeated the act in unison. Thousands of Quagoa, erased in heartbeats. Some tried to flee, others cowered behind the corpses of their kin, but it was useless. Red dragons sensed heat. To think one could vanish from their sight was pitiful. Half the time their master had allotted was already gone, but it was not enough. The shame of their earlier failure demanded more. Thus, gathering as one, the dragons turned not only on the Quagoa their lord had pointed to, but upon the very warrens themselves. This time, they would erase the pests at their root. And if the first attack had been too noisy, the next would be silence itself. The command from their master had been clear: cull the Quagoa, quietly. To have been scolded once already was humiliation enough. To carry out their duty noisily, drawing attention with chaos and thunder, would only dishonor them further. Thus this time, they resolved to strike swiftly, silently. They emerged from the narrow caverns into a city sprawling beneath the mountain. For a moment they hovered above it, then the leader of the flight gave the order. Within their throats, fire churned, compressed, refined, transmuted until the crimson blaze was distilled into white brilliance. It was not flame, but annihilation itself, heat rivaling the surface of a star, unleashed in a single breath. The breath weapon, supreme armament of the dragon race. The red dragon's variant was pure fire, condensed and fanned into a blinding spray. It fanned outward in a radiant ring, a white corona of obliteration. Wherever it touched, Quagoa collapsed in silence, reduced in an instant to ash, flesh, bone, teeth, and claw alike. All 10 dragons exhaled together. In one wave, tens of thousands of life signs vanished. Half their number gone in an eye blink. Another volley was readied, but a shrill voice rose from below. Great ones. Mighty race. Hear us, please. One dragon tilted its head. A Quagoa stood among the ruins, clad in crude finery, a crown perched atop its skull. We mean you no harm. We would not oppose such greatness. The chieftain, one dragon thought. They felt no need to answer. They spread their wings, fire gathering again to consume him where he stood, then hesitated. To end the leader here and now would be efficient, but it was not what their lord had commanded. The order had been clear: cull them. Do not annihilate. Final judgment lay with the master alone. The crowned creature shrieked on, but the dragons ignored it. They turned their fury elsewhere, spreading fire across warrens and streets. It was then they sensed something else. From the largest structure, a palace stolen from dwarves, came a trace of power. Cold, blue, familiar, and yet unfamiliar. The aura of their own kind. A frostkin. A hatchling, perhaps. Grown, but unrefined. Its presence is weak. Contempt flickered in their golden eyes, but they returned swiftly to their task. Our orders are the Quaggoa. Nothing more. They resumed their work. The shrieking voices below soon dwindled into silence. The Quaggoa population, once a tide of 80,000 across clans, had in this city been halved, then halved again. When at last the fire died down, only a third of their numbers remained, perhaps 20,000. Enough to survive. Enough to avoid extinction. Enough to satisfy their master's restraint. This will suffice. The time our Lord allotted us is nearly gone. Good. Let us make our report. With 30 heartbeats left, they shaped their message. Through the sending, they delivered the tally. The Quaggoa culled, the remnants left in check, and, most important, the trace of a frost dragon bloodline discovered within the dwarven halls. Satisfied, the 10 red dragons allowed themselves to fade. Their forms unraveled into motes of crimson light, retreating to the astral gate from whence they had come. And the cavern was silent once more. 74 Because it is all too fragile. 4. Chapter 74. Because it is all too fragile. 4. Countless forms of life inhabit the Azerlija mountain range. From the smallest insects to colossal monsters, the entire range forms a vast ecosystem that thrives and circulates as one. At its peak, two forces vie for supremacy. At the summit of such a massive ecosystem, beings of higher intelligence and extraordinary power reign, utterly distinct from ordinary monsters. Yet, in the present age, it is not one, but two rulers that stand at the apex of the range. In the north dwell the giants, beings named after their form and abilities, the frost giants. Though humanoid in shape, once grown, their height exceeds 5 meters. With sharp intellect, immense resistance to cold, formidable magic resistance, mastery over ice, and unparalleled physical might, these beings dominate the northern expanse as sovereigns. The central and southern reaches are shrouded in secrecy, yet in recent years the Quaggoa clans have risen greatly in power, driving the dwarves to their last bastions. Still, the Quaggoa elders, and above all their clan king Periuro, know full well the true masters they serve. They are the frost dragons, also called ice dragons, or white dragons. This lineage of Dragonkin dwells upon the highest peaks of the range, blessed with absolute resistance to cold. With vast bodies and overwhelming might, they hold sway over nearly the entire range. Yet, aside from their clashes with the frost giants of the north, they rarely reveal themselves to the wider world. How tedious. How dull. How much longer must I repeat such pitiful skirmishes? So spoke the ruler of this generation's frost dragons, the one who styled himself the White Dragon Lord, Olisardark Halilul. Wearied of the endless, fruitless struggle against the frost giants for control of the range, he now burned with dissatisfaction. The power of dragon and giant stood nearly equal. Thus, neither side had dared launch a full-scale war, trading instead in probing clashes and measured skirmishes. But to Olisardark, this was intolerable. He was of the exalted dragon race, lord of the mountains, and destined to place the world beneath his claws. To think that such a being should waste eternity in a stale contest against mere giants, an affront beyond forgiveness. He needed greater strength, overwhelming force to crush the giants outright. For that, he needed numbers. When Olisardark had reached maturity, his kin numbered no more than 10 at best, far too few. So he resolved to increase their strength by other means. He had already taken 3 mates, and sired many offspring. Yet raising them to true power would take too long. Even by the long measure of Dragonkin, the weight was intolerable. Thus, he sought another path. It cannot be helped. To destroy the giants, our brood alone is insufficient. And so, he conceived a scheme. Ordinarily, dragons disdained guile and stratagems, for their innate might made such devices beneath them. But for this one aim, subjugating the frost giants, Olisardark would make an exception. He searched for pawns among the other denizens of the range, ogres, trolls, lamias, lizardmen, orcs, goblins. Then, he found them, the Quaggoa. A lowly race, but with scraps of intelligence and culture. Numerous. Weak, but able to move as one. Most importantly, fatally vulnerable to cold. That weakness ensured that should they ever rebel, they could be destroyed with ease. They were perfect. The Quaggoa would never win against giants. But Olisardark did not need allies, he needed expendable pawns. I must not stir too soon. To provoke the frost giants recklessly would be unwise. For though dragon and giant alike stood atop the predator's cast of the range, the frost giant's total immunity to cold robbed the dragon's breath of its edge. Their massive weapons could wound even Dragonkind. If their numbers surged, defeat was possible. Indeed, some dragons had already fallen, reduced to guard dogs for the giants. No, caution was needed. He would not rear the quagga out of benevolence. He would fatten them as fodder, unleash them against the giants, and watch both sides bleed. If any survived with hatred in their hearts, so be it. Quagga were but frail vermin, trembling and freezing at a mere exhalation of his breath. Having resolved himself, Olisardark turned his eyes toward the quagga. He began by observing. What sort of creatures were they? How did they live? What strength did they possess? His judgment was swift, they were contemptible. Yet, gathered in great numbers, they might serve as pawns. That was enough. Very well. I shall raise these wretches for a time. So he scattered ores near their burrows, ores he had hoarded. The quagga, foolish as ever, carried them to their young. The minerals warped their growth, birthing mutant strains of heightened power. And among them emerged a miracle beyond even Olisardark's foresight, a quagga with not only strength, but rare intellect and cunning, an aberration among aberrations. This was Periuro, the hero of the quagga. With Periuro's rise, the clans united. All 8 clans together, nearly 80,000 strong. Even Olisardark felt a flicker of tension at such numbers. And under Periuro's command, they surged forth to claim the mountain range as their own. Their first prey, the monsters of the depths, and the dwarves with their cities and fortresses carved into the stone. The quagga swarmed the dwarves, seizing their capital and burning their cities. They enslaved the survivors, building power until at last, they forged a kingdom and raised armies. Then, before them, Olisardark revealed himself. HMPH. Base-born creatures. I shall deign to rule you. Rejoice. What? You monster. Monster. It seems you lesser breeds are in need of education. With but a breath, he slew the defiant quagga, frail against cold, shivered at his mere exhalation, some froze to death where they stood. Resistance crumbled into submission. Kneeling, pressing their snouts to the ground, they swore allegiance. We pledge our fealty. Rule us, mighty one. Accepted. So Olisardark claimed dominion, in boundless arrogance. Periuro bent the knee, though his obedience was hollow. Olisardark knew this well, but what did it matter? They were expendable. And already he had designs for his next slaves. As he studied the quagga, he turned his gaze also upon the dwarves. And what he saw impressed him. Weak in body, but gifted with craft, smiths of enchanted weapons, artisans of tools that magnified their power beyond measure. A race of great potential. Too dangerous to subjugate hastily. He deemed it unwise to attempt their domination before erasing all will to resist. First, he would break them with quagga. Enslave them through quagga hands. When the vermin were spent, cast into the jaws of the frost giants, he would step forth as the magnanimous conqueror, granting the dwarves mercy, in exchange for their chains. The whip, and the carrot. Hatred sown through quagga cruelty, loyalty reaped through his feigned benevolence. A perfect plan, or so he thought. With smug contempt, Olisardark smiled at the thought of his pawns. The scheme was in motion. Soon the dwarves would kneel, the quagga would bleed, and the frost giants would fall. With the creatures of the mountains forged into his army, he would conquer the world. That day was not far, and Olisardark reveled in the dream. And yet, who could have foreseen the day that awaited him? What did you say? Olisardark was shaken. Before his eyes, the clan king of the quagga, Periuro, lay prostrate on the ground. His face was twisted in ruinous emotion, his limbs drawn in, his head pressed to the floor with not a trace of pride or dignity. From his eyes flowed not tears, but blood, red liquid spilling like weeping wounds. With crimson eyes streaming, Periuro shrieked like a mad beast. Red dragons. The red dragons appeared, and slaughtered my clans to the last. The red tribe. Why would they appear here? Olisardark's thoughts turned blank. He knew the red dragons well, kin of fire, the very opposite of his own kind. Yet they did not dwell in these mountains. By nature, Dragonkind did not live alongside other breeds, and least of all those of opposing elements. And though the range held a lava gorge fit for fire creatures, it was far too narrow, too meager to house dragons. No, the red tribe's dwelling must lie far away, in volcanic lands or deserts where heat smoldered unending. Across his long life, Olisardark had never once met them. They were a separate line, foreign and distant. For them to suddenly appear here, he almost asked why, but Periuro was in no state to answer. Why have they come? They killed us. All of us. 6 clans are nearly extinct. We don't even know how many remain. Oh White Dragon Lord, please, save us. Answer me. A breath of frost escaped his maw. Instantly, the blood running from Periuro's eyes froze, frost gathering across his fur and skin. The burning frenzy in the Quagga king's mind was snuffed out, chilled into sharp awareness. Explain. Speak clearly. What of the Red Tribe? They came and slaughtered. And yet I did not feel it. What? Periuro's eyes widened in horror. However vast the palace might be, such chaos outside should have shaken it. The Reds had unleashed carnage in the very skies above the capital. How could the palace remain untouched? His terror and Olisardark's suspicion could not align. The White Dragon Lord's face hardened with wrath. Did this wretch dare mock him with lies? You dare. You crawl here to spew falsehoods before me. It's true. The red dragons appeared, I swear. Then how could I, of all beings, not know? Speak your true purpose. What is your aim in coming here, babbling lies before your lord? The weight of dragon fear descended, fury and dread pouring over Periuro like a crushing tide. Terror seized every vein, robbing him of breath. The red dragons that had rained white death from the sky were terrifying, but this white dragon, burning with rage, was no less. In his despair, Periuro's thoughts twisted. Why? Why this madness? Why had the Reds come? Why strike us down? If death was our fate, why not drag these cursed white dragons to the grave as well? He seethed with hatred for some unseen hand, and his will crumbled into surrender. And then, step, step, soft footsteps echoed across the polished floor of the throne room. The sound was faint, yet even Periuro's ears caught it. Olisardark heard it too. Too small to be a dragon. Perhaps another Quagga. The white dragon's vast eyes narrowed. But the intruder was not Quagga. Nor was it any creature native to these mountains. So this is the palace, then. Quite impressive. The figure was draped in black cloth, its entire body swathed save for the upper head. Speaking in a leisurely tone, it strode unhurriedly into the hall. From beneath the shrouded hood, golden eyes gleamed with a spark of amusement. 75 Because it is all too fragile 5. Chapter 75. Because it is all too fragile 5. Perhaps it was because of his rash command. Feeling faintly uneasy, Tiamat vaulted the dwarven citadel walls once more, intending to return to the leaky cask. Yet before he had even trudged back to the tavern's rooftop, a message reached him. Open corner bracket my lord, we have fulfilled your command. Already. Open corner bracket indeed. As you ordered, the number of Quagga has been reduced to less than 1/4. We judge that they shall trouble you with their noise no longer, and in accordance with your decree, we refrained from exterminating them completely. I see. Tiamat instinctively rubbed his head. His body produced no sweat, yet he felt as if cold perspiration were running down his neck. His draconic frame was far too strong to secrete fluids from mere nerves or temperature shifts, yet the feeling remained. One careless word of his, and an entire race's population had been cut to a fourth. And this, within only minutes of their summoning. The epic spell Dragon Strike lasted no more than 5 minutes. He had already wasted 30 seconds of that span with his own mistaken command. That left 4.5 minutes, barely enough time, yet in that short interval, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, had perished. If extinction had been mentioned, then the death toll may well have climbed into 5 figures. A lie. For an instant the thought rose. But then, he admitted it made sense. Considering this world's balance of power, the outcome was believable. He had invoked one of Yggdrasil's most devastating skills, an epic spell among the strongest. Such destruction was to be expected. Even his own casual breath could tunnel through hundreds of meters of solid cavern. 10 dragons, each of level 70, against Quagga, pitiful creatures barely level 20 at best, slaughter was inevitable. That he had caused it gave him pause, but only briefly. Well, they're just monsters anyway. The dwarves had been kind, even welcoming, stirring his fantasy sensibilities in a way he enjoyed. Clearing out the pests that plagued them was hardly a crime. In Yggdrasil, he had massacred not thousands, but millions upon millions, grinding mobs for experience. Any veteran player would have. Thus Tiamat swept away his brief pangs of guilt. They're only mobs. Worthless trash. If it keeps the dwarves safe, what does it matter? So then, is there anything else? Open corner bracket yes, my lord. During the culling of the Quagga, we discovered what appears to be a dwarven city. As we proceeded with the purge, within its largest building we sensed the presence of another kin. Another kin. Open corner bracket indeed. Though we could not confirm with sight, we believe it may have been a white, or frost dragon. Likely a very young one, or a feeble-minded whelp. A white, is it? A rather nostalgic breed. In Yggdrasil, dragons had long been divided into two great categories: true dragons, the mighty, masters of power, magic, intelligence, and wisdom. And lesser dragons, creatures that bore the shape but lacked the essence, pale imitations. The former were called dragons, the latter, wyverns or drakes. True dragons are broadly divided into four lineages: the chromatic dragons, whose scales gleam in vivid colors; the metallic dragons, whose bodies shine with the luster of precious metals; the gem dragons, whose scales sparkle like radiant jewels; and the lung dragons, whose serpentine forms and branch-like horns set them apart from their kin. Beyond these, there exist other rare lineages that defy such categories, transcendent beings such as the dragon gods or the legendary epic dragons. White dragons belong to the chromatic lineage. Among the five great chromatics, red, blue, green, black, and white, they are considered the lowest in standing. Yet, lowest hardly means weak. In terms of attributes, whites can even counter reds, who are often ranked as the strongest of all. In Yggdrasil, however, they were infamous for their rarity. Unlike other dragons, they dwell deep in Helheim and Niflheim, their snowy hides blending into glaciers and blizzards as natural camouflage. Even when discovered, they were a nightmare to face, slowing foes, sapping stamina, reducing item durability, and inflicting endless cold-based debuffs. Their notoriety was high, yet their actual stats were underwhelming, making them an unpopular choice even among dragon enthusiasts. For Tiamat, that history lent a certain nostalgia. To think that a white dragon existed here, when in Yggdrasil, even hunting them down was nearly impossible. And more, that this one was said to be young, or even feeble-minded. Such an individual case had never existed in Yggdrasil's bestiary. His interest was piqued. So, what did you do with them? Open corner bracket nothing. Your command was strictly to deal with the Quaggoa. We dared not touch them, nor even lower our guard. That judgment, we believed, belonged only to you. We will transmit their coordinates. Well done. Tiamat praised his loyal servants. Their report had stirred genuine curiosity within him. He wanted to see these white dragons with his own eyes. Open corner bracket. O Lord, to receive praise even after our earlier failure, such honor is beyond us. It's fine. You did well. Now, the summoning time must be almost up. Any problems? Open corner bracket. None. The time is nearly finished. We eagerly await the day you call upon us again. And with that, the connection ended. Not with a timer ticking down like in a game, but with a distinct sense of finality. So that's how this works, Tiamat thought. Good work, red dragons. Now then, let's pay a visit, shall we? The leaky cask was just nearby, but the thought of white dragons tugged at him. He had already stepped away from his cover. What harm would a few more minutes cause? Barely 10 minutes had passed since his earlier excursion. He might as well indulge his curiosity. Slipping into a shadowed alley, Tiamat opened a gate using the coordinates sent by the Reds. Passing through, he shut it behind him, only to find himself not in the dwarven stronghold's alleys, but standing before a majestic city. Oh! A low sound of admiration escaped him. It was a fine city indeed. Though far from Shinshi's grandeur, there was an almost ancient artistry to it, the cracked avenues and towering halls, the massive structures scattered throughout. To think such things were raised without machines, using only stone and timber, it was enough to inspire awe. Tiamat recalled the dwarven innkeeper's words. This must be the lost dwarven capital. At such scale, it certainly deserved the title. Beautiful, grand, artistic, beyond his vocabulary to capture. He was no critic or artisan. His thoughts went no further than impressive, splendid. A marvelous city. Perhaps even desirable. Yet he shook the thought away. That could wait. The white dragon came first. Leaping into the air, he soared toward the largest building, the palace at the city's heart. Though abandoned by dwarves long ago, its polished halls and gleaming pillars impressed him still. Carvings of armored dwarven warriors, hammer in hand, adorned the columns. No machinery, no enchanted tools, only dwarven craft. Truly remarkable. So this is the royal palace, quite a sight. Admiring it as he went, he strode deeper. Footsteps echoed, clack, clack, but he ignored them. Then, catching a faint aura of fear, he followed it inward. There, he saw them, a mound of gold glittering like a small hill, and before it a creature trembling like some mix between a mole and an anteater, likely a quaggoa. And atop that mound, Coiled amid jewels, sat the white dragons themselves. Wait, those aren't whelps at all. The Reds had told him it was only a whelp, yet this creature was far larger than expected. By sheer size alone it surpassed an adult dragon, its frame even greater than the ones he had summoned earlier. If Yggdrasil's taxonomy and this world's draconic ecology were not so different, then this would not be a youngling at all but an ancient. Even if the standards here differed, to call such a beast a child was absurd. Its body easily stretched over 10 meters. Clearly a fully grown dragon, or perhaps even some kind of mutation. Tiamat tilted his head slightly, bemused. You, what are you? Just a spectator. Don't mock me. State your name, dwarf. A dwarf, am I? Given his current guise, he supposed the mistake was natural. Next to a dragon towering over 10 meters, any human seemed pathetically small. Still, a flicker of irritation stirred within him, perhaps because his true form was far larger than this pretender's. He had no intention of revealing it, but his lips curled. I am no dwarf. And yes, I came only to watch, to see the white dragons. Then gaze upon me. If it is my majesty you seek, cast aside that rag you wear and bow your head, insect. At that, Olisardark displayed a hint of uncharacteristic mercy. He took the words at face value, believing the stranger had come to behold his glory. With a puff of frigid breath, he sought both to strip away the concealing cloth and to assert his dominance. A blast of icy wind howled through the chamber. Tiamat's cloak billowed wildly, though it did not tear away, the wrappings loosened, revealing the armor and gear beneath. Jet black, gleaming equipment shimmered faintly with power, clearly no ordinary relics. Olisardark's massive eyes flashed with avarice. He was too fixated on the treasures to notice the subtle shift in Tiamat's expression, the faint smile wiped away. Such fine trinkets for one so small, I've never seen treasures like these. If you wish forgiveness for your insolent tongue, surrender them to me. Hey! For a moment Tiamat's face went blank. Did this witless lizard truly just say that? Not only had it dared sully his mood with a breath attack, but now it demanded his possessions. Even in Yggdrasil, dragons were considered high-intelligence mobs, greedy, yes, and occasionally whimsical enough to seize players' gear. But to face such insolence here, in this world, unthinkable. And worse still, that a feeble-minded wretch like this had the gall to command him. Tiamat's golden eyes snapped open. The black vertical slit of his pupil narrowed and fixed directly on Olisardark. You, insignificant fool. Did you just presume to order me? What? Olisardark recoiled, then bristled with rage. Cold fury poured out in waves, filling the palace with biting chill. The frost dragon's wrath was suffocating enough to leave Periuro, still cowering nearby, on the verge of freezing to death. Not that either dragon cared. The white dragon rose from his throne of gold, a mountain of scaled muscle cloaked in blizzards. His entire form radiated lethal frost as he glared down at the insolent dwarf. Pitiful insect. Do you comprehend the gulf between us? Look upon me in despair. This is the difference in station. To most creatures, such a presence would have been overwhelming. To stand before that towering white form would shatter courage and crush the will to resist. But to Tiamat, it was nothing. No awe, no fear, only simmering anger, and a trace of pity. I see. Then allow me to show you the difference in station you so boast of, though it may be harsher than you expect. Tiamat's mouth curved into a thin smile. With one hand, he reached up, grasping the invisible crown upon his brow. Asterisk 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 asterisk. If you want to read 10 advanced chapters ahead, visit my Patreon, patreon.com/vanity01.